Hey everyone, Justin here. I apologize for how late this is coming out, but I wanted to get our interpretation video out for the year before our ECIC and Buffalo Public seasons start. A lot of the stuff in this video is pretty much identical to what we talked about last year, but it would definitely be worth it to pay attention and remind ourselves of some of the major changes that were supposed to come in last year. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So with that being said, let's get moving on this. This is my information. At any point, if you want to get a hold of me to get clarification, ask any questions you have. If you have a specific situation that came up in a game, feel free to contact me. Email is probably the best, but also you can normally get a hold of me by phone, especially in the evenings. Also, please feel free to make my information available to coaches if they would like to contact me as well. The goal, just like last year, is to be as open and transparent as possible with all of this, and to ultimately make this organization more consistent in enforcing the rules of the game, and also make ourselves and coaches and players as knowledgeable as possible so that we have as few issues as possible throughout the season and future seasons. So I'd like to change the order of what we've done in the past a little bit. I'd like to start right away with our state adopted rules. I've already gotten a couple of questions about these. So I figure this is a good place to start. First of all, these are our state adopted rules. Speed up rules, I have been told by the state interpreter, are a league decision. What I have found out, the major speed up rule that we have is the courtesy runner for pitcher and or catcher. At the varsity level, there is no courtesy runner at all in the ECIC. I have had it come up in a Monsignor Martin game already, and the coaches agreed at the plate meeting to have a courtesy runner with 2 outs for the catcher. That's fine. And with BPS, I have not heard anything from BPS about this. My general suggestion for Buffalo Public Schools, for the Monsignor Martin, and for any non-varsity game, any JV or modified game, guys, whatever the coaches agree to at the plate meeting, as far as courtesy runners, we are perfectly fine with, especially this year with our limited playoff structure. It just is not going to matter as much as it has in the past. And with a compressed season, whatever the coaches want to do to get players in the game, as long as they are following, as long as they agree, and as long as they don't break any of our other lineup rules, we're going to be fine with it. 10-run rule. This is a rule in the Monsignor Martin only. And again, by coach agreement at the beginning of a game, that is perfectly fine. But the Monsignor Martin does have a 10 after 5 rule on the books for every game. The ECIC and BPS have not approved it. But again, if it's what the coaches agree to, then go with it. Game ending procedures, again, when the coaches say they're done, they're done. We talked about this a little bit in last year's interpretation meeting. We cannot agree to a shortened game at the plate meeting, technically. But if the coaches decide after 5 innings or 4 innings or 2 innings that they're done, then they're done. And we are not going to argue that. And then just because it's here, forfeits in New York State are determined by either the section or the state. Really what we're going to do in a situation where the rule book would support a forfeit, we are going to use the language that we are suspending the game and referring it to either the league or the section. Okay. There's really no reason for us to call a forfeit on the field. We're going to let the league offices deal with that. So suspend a game, absolutely, if you need to, and if the rules support it, but we are not going to be declaring forfeits on the field in Western New York. We'll let someone else deal with that. There was really one major rule change last year that we discussed at length, and then never really saw it. And that's our new designated hitter rule. So first of all, the traditional designated hitter that we've had for pretty much my entire lifetime, that guy who can hit for any defensive player, that rule is still in effect. It has not changed. Okay. So that is an option still. We still terminate in this situation, we terminate the DH when the defensive player hits or the DH plays defense. All right. So if either one of that pair plays the other half, then we terminate the DH. Otherwise, they're pretty much two separate positions who can be subbed for independently of each other. The new DH rule is the player DH rule. So that is that a player can hit for themselves. Essentially, what this allows coaches the flexibility to do is to start with a straight 9, but to give themselves the option to remove that player, one player who is predetermined at the beginning of the game at the plate meeting, to remove them from the defensive side of the game and keep the bat in the lineup. Okay. This can happen for any position. We will most likely see it for the pitcher to keep the pitcher's bat in the lineup. One player is listed as the DH and a defensive player. We're going to see it just as it's listed at the top of this lineup card as a position/DH. The defensive half of this can be substituted at any time. And the original player DH does have defensive reentry one time as a defensive starter. That's something that we didn't really clarify much last year. And then luckily it didn't come up. But the defensive side of this of the player DH is very flexible and actually acts pretty similarly to the traditional rule. The thing that is different in a player DH situation, if that player is ever substituted for offensively, we're playing a straight 9 the rest of the game. The DH is terminated and we're in a straight 9. Okay. As a hitter or a runner, we terminate the DH. This, like I said, gives coaches some more flexibility to keep a strong bat in the lineup and either play some defensive percentages late in the game or to get a pitcher off the mound because of either arm trouble or just our pitch counts and keep that bat in the lineup. Some of you might remember from a couple of years ago, New York adopted something like this a couple of years ago, the pitcher DH, which is very similar to the junior college rule. That is now gone. We did not have an answer for this last year, but the pitcher DH rule has been eliminated and completely replaced by the federation rule. So now we have 3 different options for an offensive lineup. We have a straight 9. We have the standard DH which is your 10-man lineup. And we have our new player DH rule. Just something to remember because it's already come up once or twice for me. If a coach gives you a straight 9 lineup card at the beginning of the game, then that's what they're playing. They cannot come back later and say, oh, by the way, my 4-hitter was actually the player DH and I want to substitute him on defense. This needs to be indicated on the lineup card in pregame or else it doesn't exist. Okay. I've already run into this a couple of times in my games where a coach was batting straight 9, and then later wanted to take the pitcher off the mound, but keep him in the batting order. And I was not able to allow it because he did not indicate that player DH at the beginning. So just a heads up that could come up. All right. And our points of emphasis are the same as last year. Obviously, the DH is going to be a point of emphasis because it's a new rule and it's a pretty major rule change. Fortunately, we don't really deal with courtesy runners, at least at the varsity level. But if a courtesy runner does come in, they can never have any function with a DH, okay? No matter what the lineup option is, as soon as that DH comes off the field in an offensive capacity, the DH is done. That includes if he is the pitcher DH or the catcher DH. Okay, he is not the pitcher or the catcher while on offense, even in the player DH. So he will have to run for himself or terminate the DH. JV and modified umpires, be aware of this, but also realize that it's probably not going to come up in our lower level games, partially because the coaches don't know the rule and partially because there is so much flexibility in our batting order and our lineup rules at those lower levels that this rule isn't really needed down there, but it could happen. Let's see. Okay, and this is our traditional DH situation, right? The first half of it. If the DH is batting for someone else in the traditional role, when he bats, he's a DH. And if someone comes in to run for him, then they are a substitute. And if that happens under the new rule, then the DH is terminated. Game ending procedures, I already talked about just briefly. The state has not adopted any game ending procedures as a state. But this is, I know we had some questions, especially for certain games and certain leagues. By mutual agreement of the opposing coaches and umpire in chief, any remaining play may be shortened or the game terminated. What that means is, like I said before, and I'll emphasize it again, we cannot agree to a shortened game at the plate meeting. Everything is a scheduled 7-inning game. But if the coaches agree to a 5-inning game, we're going to let it happen because it was a 7-inning game at the plate meeting. And then they agreed, mutual agreement. Everyone agrees that we're doing this to shorten or end the game. Okay. It's a technicality, but this is how we have to navigate this in order to avoid protest or legality issues later on. It is a scheduled 7-inning game, which the coaches mutually agreed to end early later on. Force play slide rule actually has not been a major issue for us or for this region, which is great. Apparently other places, other parts of the country are having major issues with this because this is the 3rd or 4th year in a row that it has been a national point of emphasis. Runners are never required to slide, but if they slide, it must be legal. Legal slide, feet first or head first. Head first, we have a lot of leeway as far as what is legal. Feet first, at least one leg and one buttock shall be on the ground. That's our start. That's our starting point. One leg and a butt cheek on the ground. Pop-up slides are illegal in high school baseball. You can see why just from this picture. The force play slide rule is a safety rule. No pop-up slides. No slides with a leg raised higher than the fielder's knee. Now, while there is a play being made, okay, if a kid slides in like celebrating a double and his leg is raised and there's no fielder around, we're not going to call him because this is the force play slide rule. So there needs to be a play. Usually, almost all the time, the force play slide rule is in effect in a double play situation. But no leg raised higher than a fielder's knee. We cannot slide through or beyond the base, okay? That includes just the feet going through the base. They need to be able to stop within the confines of the base. If they slide through and make contact, it is interference. Sliding away from a base. If runners must slide either directly to a base or away from the fielder, okay? The classic takeout slide where they slide into the fielder away from the base is illegal. So if they slide away from the base and make contact or interfere with the play at all, make the fielder do something, even if no contact happens, we're going to grab that interference. It's not just contact. Just make sure to see that last little bit to avoid making contact or altering the play of the fielder. So even if there is no contact, if the fielder has to do something to avoid that illegal slide, we're going to grab the double play. A runner is out when they illegally slide on a force play. This is interference, and the batter runner is also out, and we return all other runners. You may notice there is no judgment here in whether or not the double play could have been turned. If we have an illegal slide at second base, it doesn't matter if the batter runner has already made it to first and there's no chance of the play. We penalize the illegal slide, grab the double play, and send all the other runners back if there are any. Okay? To reiterate, there is no judgment as to whether the double play could have actually been turned. The illegal slide is enough to grab that double play. And then we have a few examples, which I'm going to skip through. We went over these last year. They're available in last year's video on our website. And like I said, this really hasn't been much of an issue. So we're going to skip through our force play slide rules example. Another couple of points of emphasis, the compliant baseball. We need these stamps. We talked about it last year. We need the two stamps, the NFHS stamp and the NOXI stamp. This was effective last year. We made this clear to the teams last year, and then the games were not played. So theoretically, I'm hoping that teams didn't use any of last year's baseballs and we're good to go. Okay, that's my hope. Okay, we are requiring that mark. This is a safety concern and also just a uniform standards concern. Penalty for non-compliant baseballs. If we are provided baseballs that don't have these stamps, there's no penalty. New York decided a while ago that we are going to be what we call a play and report state, which means we play the game with the non-compliant baseballs. Then you shoot me or Norb a text or an email and let us know what happened so that we can put it on report with Section 6. All right, you're going to play the game, but then we just report it so that the section can deal with it. I would like a copy of those emails just so that I can keep track of what's going on. So please email either me or both me and Norb so that we can make that report. But you are going to play the game with non-compliant baseballs. Now, remember last year we had some fun discussion about this one. Catcher's chest protectors also now need the NOXI stamp. That stamp will be in one of two places, either up on the collar on the left or right, or some manufacturers are putting them down at the bottom of the chest protector, again, at the left, on the left or right. The procedures or the standards that have been set indicate that it needs to be a contrasting color to the chest protector, so it really should not be too hard to find. So the rule is head protector has always needed the stamp. Now we need the chest protector with the stamp, and we need shin guards, obviously, at all times. Again, safety rule. Okay. The new chest protectors have a thicker piece covering the heart area. And I actually have not gone looking for one of these, but I've heard from the state interpreter and from other people that you can make some pretty tiny kids look like Superman with these chest protectors. It's going to be pretty clear whether or not they're wearing one. Okay. That being said, let's look at this underlined part. There are a couple of options here. Either the chest protector itself meets the standard and has a stamp, or there's a couple of undershirts that have been manufactured that meet the standard, where the shirt plus an old chest protector combined meet the standard. So this last sentence here is very important. It is the responsibility of the coach to verify that his or her players are properly equipped. That means that for us at the plate meeting, we ask, coach, are your players legally and properly equipped under high school rules? They tell us yes. We take that, and that's good enough for us. Okay. If we are made aware later on by either the catcher himself, which would be silly, but it probably could happen, or by an opposing coach, then we have to do something about it. And this is where we had some discussion last year. Per Elliot Hopkins, who is our national rules guy, we order the player to wear the proper equipment. And if they refuse or don't have it, then by rule, we are supposed to eject that player and get someone else in there who has the correct protective equipment. Now, realistically, I don't think we're going to get to step 2 unless a coach is really giving you a hard time. Because at step 1, order the player to wear the proper equipment. We're going to have a conversation with the coach and say, hey, coach, this is the rule. Do you have the proper equipment available? And if the answer is no, we're going to end the game there and put it on report and send a report to me and to Norb so that we can talk to the section about it. Okay. I don't think we're going to get to an ejection of the player, because I would hope that we're going to end the game after step 1 is not able to be fulfilled. Now, if the equipment is available, step 1, we're good. Well, it's available, but the player or the player's parent refuses, then we're going to dump the player and find a catcher who is willing to wear the proper equipment. But I feel like I feel like we're probably just going to have to suspend the game and move on from there. And then batting helmets with the C flap. Again, just because this is a safety rule, it's a point of emphasis. The C flap has to be specially designed for the helmet. Any kind of homebrew solutions where dad screwed a C flap onto an existing helmet is not legal. Again, we are not going and looking for this. It's going to be covered under the coach's certification that they're legally and properly equipped. But if this comes to your attention, you're going to need to see the stamp on the helmet. And it's going to need to be clear that the C flap was there at the time of manufacture. And as always, pitching positions. We have 2 legal pitching positions in high school baseball, the windup and the set. The windup has our pivot foot on the rubber, perpendicular to the rubber, and our non-pivot foot even with or behind that dotted red line, which is the front of the pitcher's plate, even with or behind it. And that's our windup. Okay. This is our set. This is the other legal pitching position. The set, your entire pivot foot is parallel to and touching the pitcher's plate, and the non-pivot foot is in front of, completely in front of that dotted red line. Okay. Now remember the set. Oh, first of all, we're no longer required to have the entire pivot foot in contact. So this foot position where just the toe is touching the edge of the front of the rubber and they're kind of off the edge, this is legal. This is legal. Essentially, the rule change just recognizes that we don't always have the best mounds to work with. And if this is where a pitcher finds a comfortable place to throw from, then the rules allow it. All right. This is not legal. This is the hybrid. It has not been legal at the high school level for quite a few years now. And it was never a problem for a while until college and the pros started allowing this and high schoolers started emulating it. This is not legal because it is not the windup, because this non-pivot foot is in front of the rubber, and it is not the set because the pivot foot is not parallel to the rubber. Okay, so what are we going to do in a hybrid situation. The pitcher is able to fix this until they commit to pitch. So if a pitcher comes to the rubber like this, we're going to allow it until he begins his windup. He's winding up from here, right? The hybrid stands for winding up. It's just not a legal windup position. So as soon as that non-pivot foot moves to start the windup, we're going to call the illegal pitch and call a ball or a balk, depending on whether or not there are runners. Until he commits to pitch, he is going to be able to fix it by stepping off the back of the rubber, disengaging with his pivot foot, and fixing it. Again, and taking a legal pitching position. Big suggestion here, use some game management, use some preventive umpiring. If we can catch this in the first inning warmups and tell the kid to fix it so that I don't have to call it, then please let's do that. Okay. I've had it once already this year. And I brought the coach out, talked to the kid and said, hey, that's not legal. Here are your options. Either you can take a legal windup position, or you can just pitch from the stretch today and until you fix this in practice, if you think it's going to mess with your mechanics. And the kid decided to pitch from the stretch for the day. And that was perfectly legal. I am going to say we're going to have a harder time enforcing this year because last year and the last couple of years, we were able to say, hey, look, everyone, this isn't legal at the college level either, so you might as well fix it now. Unfortunately, well, fortunately or unfortunately for us, this is now legal in college, which makes high school the only rule set where this particular pitching position is not legal, but we have to call it. So again, let's try to fix it in warmups during those 8 warm-up pitches so that we don't have to actually make a call here. As always, jewelry rule, no jewelry, no necklaces, no bracelets, no earrings, no watches, except for religious or medical situations. Religious needs to be under the shirt and taped. Medical can be visible or over the uniform, but also must be taped. Okay. Again, this is part of our coach's certification that we are legally and properly equipped. If it becomes a problem, just remember that the first infraction is a team warning. The second and subsequent infractions are ejections of players. And again, we would prefer not to get to that point. So this is everything I just talked about was stuff that we also talked about last year. Let's talk about some general considerations. Most of this is going to be COVID related. The state association says that the home team will be responsible for game balls. That's fine. A couple of schools already, a couple of games I've had have decided that the defensive team would be each defense would handle their own baseballs. We're going to say this is fine. It still meets the spirit of the COVID protocol. It's what we operated under all last summer in our rec season. So I see no problem with this for each team to control their own baseballs. Actually, that it seems to me that would actually reduce the cross-contamination, if you will, even more than what the state has said. So I have no problem with that. We're going to try to appoint one person in either the home dugout or each dugout to handle game balls. This is just a game management thing and a pace of play thing. If each pitcher knows exactly where to look to get a new baseball, where to look in the dugout, then that's going to make us go so much faster. So if we just know where the balls are coming from, then that's going to be great. And the state does say that every half inning should start with a new or sanitized baseball. So Continuing with this, the state says baseballs from the dugout will go to the catcher and the catcher will put it in play. Anyone who worked last summer, again, a lot of times the baseball will go straight from the dugout to the pitcher. I have no problem with this either. Okay, I think this is also fine. Again, it follows the spirit of the rule of just getting the ball back in play. I have no problem with a team deciding whether they're going to funnel it through the catcher or just send a ball straight to the pitcher. Umpires are not required to, and in Section 6, not allowed to handle game balls. Okay, you should not be handling game balls. The only exception I can think of is to determine if a ball is cut or defaced in some way. And then student athletes should, we're trying to minimize or limit, the blowing on the hands, licking fingers, spitting on hands, all of that. Some teams have a wet rag now for players to use instead of licking their fingers and wiping it off. They'll go to the wet rag and wipe it off. But again, as we talked about last summer, the schools and the teams are the responsible parties regarding any COVID protocol, not us. So if any of those things in the last couple of slides don't happen, that's not on us. And as long as you personally are comfortable, we're going to let it go. Okay. If anything happens on a field that makes you uncomfortable from a COVID perspective, then please, you can fall back on these rules and insist that they are followed. But that is a personal decision on your part. We will support you in that, whatever way you decide to go. But from a liability perspective, as long as we as umpires follow those protocols, which our protocols are pretty simple, don't touch the baseballs and wear a mask on the field, then from a liability perspective, we're all set. And then it just comes down to your personal comfort as an individual. Plate meetings are going to change a little bit. We're going to have a socially distanced plate meeting with head coaches only. Varsity level, we're still taking lineup cards. A little bit of a change. Some teams are sharing lineups with each other before the game through Game Changer or whatever. Some of them are still exchanging physical cards. That's all fine. We still ask coaches if we're legally and properly equipped as part of our plate meeting. And then finally, we are being asked to remind coaches to follow the COVID protocols at the plate meeting. Okay. Again, we are not enforcing, we are just reminding, and really it is a school and a game administrator issue, not an umpire issue. This is all from the state. Please, if you feel the need to, bring personal hand sanitizer with you. I'm still wearing a ball bag on the field or on the plate, even though I don't handle baseballs, for water, sanitizer, that sort of thing. We're trying not to share equipment. If you feel more comfortable this way, we may umpire in gloves, whether that's athletic gloves or medical gloves. That is being allowed this year. Follow social distancing guidelines. That includes if we have an altercation, we are going to try to keep our distance as umpires the best we can, which really during a physical altercation between players, that's what we should be doing anyway. Should be standing back and taking numbers and making the coaches deal with it. Lastly, we just need to be prepared to have some sort of health screening conducted. This is a general state consideration. I have not heard of any schools yet that are insisting on something specific from their game officials as far as a temperature check or one of our, the screening surveys that I'm sure a lot of us are filling out for work anyway. I've not heard of any specific situations or schools that are doing this, but just be ready to have your temperature checked or have a symptom screening or something like that. And as we learn which schools are doing this, we will do our best to make everyone else aware of those schools so that you're a little bit more prepared. And finally, just a couple of local points of emphasis, just some things that I've seen or heard at a local level that we might want to be aware of or become a little better at. I talked about this last year, and really both of these slides, a few of these slides, all deal with situations, behavior, both inside the lines and outside. First of all, just a reminder that restriction to the bench is a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's the yellow card of high school baseball. That's the way I like to think of it. This list here, this second list are all the instances by rule where we restrict the head coach to the bench. Not in uniform, we're not going to worry about too much as long as they're in some sort of team apparel. If an assistant coach gets ejected, if a player enters a box with an illegal bat, if the bench is getting rowdy and you don't know who did it, if you think it probably should be an ejection, but you can't figure out who it was, then you can restrict the head coach to the bench. And then really any borderline ejectable offense where you're like, should I dump him or not? Remember, you have that bench restriction in your pocket as well as a good middle ground and really solid warning. And remember in high school baseball that the head coach is responsible for the conduct of players, coaching staff, and fans. We do not need to deal with fans. The coaches do, or the game administration do, which brings me to this next slide. Under the high school rules, we do not actually have direct jurisdiction over fans. We cannot, by rule, eject a fan. What we can do is stop the game until someone else deals with that fan. Okay? Your first point of contact here is the head coach. Explain to them that by rule, they're responsible for their fans, and we can restrict and then eject him for the conduct of his fans. And use your site management if we have it. Point the fan out, say they've got to be removed, and stop the game. Again, we do not have direct power or authority to eject a fan, but the authority we do have is to stop the game until it is dealt with. And finally, just a general thing on handling situations. Proper handling of situations, that doesn't mean we want fewer ejections, okay? It means that we want ejections when they're warranted, and we don't want bad ejections or unjustified ejections. In general, and I know a lot of us are aware of this, our 4-step ignore, acknowledge, warn, eject. I put restrict there in parentheses. That restriction of the head coach serves as the warning. Make sure your warning is clear. I put some language down there. You don't have to use those exact words, but the days of coach knock it off or that's enough or that sort of thing, there is a place for it, but that's not an official warning. You need to use the words official warning and tell them why they're being warned, and then tell them what's going to happen if they don't stop. That's just a game management thing, and it will help you and help us if we do end up having an ejection to have that step-by-step of what you did before, what you did to try to keep this person in the game before you ejected them. And finally, our last thing, just our yearly concussion, blood on uniforms, weather protocols. So concussions, we just want to make sure that we are recognizing potential symptoms of concussion. If a player is suspected of having a concussion, then they should be evaluated immediately. And once they exhibit those symptoms, they need to be cleared by a healthcare professional. And again, a lot of that is not really on us, but just if a kid is exhibiting these symptoms, then please get them off the field. Okay, no matter what the coach says. If they're exhibiting signs or symptoms consistent with a concussion, get them off the field, get them checked out, and handle it from there. Blood, if we're bleeding, have an open wound, any blood on a uniform needs to leave the game until we have stopped the bleeding and the uniform and or body is cleaned or changed. And then any blood exposure needs to be reported and evaluated by a healthcare professional. Blood rule in high school sports in general is if you see any blood at all, the player has to come out. Even if that blood is on the uniform, they need to either clean it or change. Lightning and thunder, couple of just general things here. Thunder is lightning. If you hear thunder, you treat it just like you saw lightning. We vacate the field, go somewhere safe. 30 minutes from the last thunder or lightning strike, and we reset the clock every time that we see lightning or hear thunder. The one consideration, COVID-related consideration for thunder or lightning is we have been asked to not go to the team dugouts to wait out rain or lightning. So either identify a neutral, safe space that the umpires can go to, or go back to your cars. Okay. We've been asked again to not go to the dugouts during a rain delay or lightning. Your best bet is probably your car in that situation. All right. So that is everything I have. I will also make that slideshow available for you so that you can flip through on your own time if you would like to. And also, I will also send it out a couple of weeks ago on the WNYUA website, but I will send out a link again. Fantastic, like half-hour to 40-minute video on how to keep a lineup card that really digs into the DH rule, the new DH rule, and a couple of other things. I would strongly encourage you all to check that out if you haven't already. So as always, I am available for you. If you need anything at all, please give me a call, give me a text, give me an email. I hope everyone has a good season, and I hope to hear from some of you throughout the season with whatever situations come up. All right, everyone, have a good spring, and I will talk to everyone soon.